We've been adding to them every night, and tonight headlines ain't because of his music. It's because of the dead body that was found in his Tesla. Not just any dead.
Tonight, why the commander-in-chief is giving the green light for certain countries to potentially shoot down Russian jets. It comes as the president gave a blistering speech at the United Nations.
They repaid kindness with crime. It's time to end the failed experiment of open borders. You have to end it now. See, I can tell you. I'm really good at this stuff. Your countries are going to hell.
All this, by the way, as the government makes a major bust. You see these servers right here? It might not look like much. Why the Secret Service, though, says they just broke up a massive operation in and around New York City. Also tonight, he's back, but not everywhere. Jimmy Kimmel returns to late night after the backlash over comments he made about Charlie Kirk. And hot off the presses, and you could say going scorched earth, Kamala Harris reemerges with a new book and a media tour, who she is and isn't pointing the finger at tonight. But first tonight, here from the Hill, he didn't hold back either. President Trump at the United Nations today, and it started rocky before the president ever got to the microphone. The president walking up to the escalator. This was the scene here with the First Lady, and you see it? Just stopped. And then they had to go on up. We'll get into that and what the White House is saying tonight, but when the president got to the podium and started talking, he didn't hold back for nearly an hour. The president calling open borders a failed experiment. He criticized climate change as a green scam, as he put it. Even criticized the UN for being ineffective and corrupt. But perhaps the most significant moments today, throughout the afternoon, coming on Russia. This one of the scenes here as well, a face-to-face with Vladimir Zelensky of Ukraine. President Trump green-lighting the idea of shooting down Russian jets if they fly too far.
Do you think that NATO countries should shoot down Russian aircraft if they enter their airspace?
Yes, I do.
We begin tonight with our Laura Ingle, who is outside the United Nations with the headlines today. Laura, you had a new headline every hour or so, it seemed like.
We sure did, Blake. As this day rolled on, we were checking our feeds and checking the monitors, and you're right. Things were happening very fast. And, you know, with the United Nations General Assembly, there is really nothing else like it, where world leaders have a chance to be face-to-face and get these personal meetings in a way that no other event does. And with multiple conflicts going on across the globe, there's really no more important time for those face-to-face meetings to take place. Now, today, as you mentioned, there was a shift in President Trump's approach to the war between Russia and Ukraine, with Trump saying that he now believes Ukraine could regain all of the territory it's lost to Russia if the country had military support from NATO and the United States, even going so far as to say Ukraine could restore its pre-war borders. Listen.
The biggest progress is that the Russian economy is terrible right now. It's, as you know, it's crashing. And that, frankly, Ukraine is doing a very good job of stopping this very large army. It's pretty amazing. You know, this is a war that should have ended in 3 days, 4 days. People said it was going to be very quick, and you got to hand it to the Ukrainian soldiers.
President Trump and French President Emmanuel Macron also met this afternoon after Macron announced his country's decision to recognize the state of Palestine during the ongoing war between Hamas and Israel. Another big headline today, Blake. And while the two disagreed on recognizing Palestine, both presidents said that October 7th just simply cannot be forgotten. And Trump also met with Middle Eastern leaders as well, said that this is the group that can do it when discussing resolving the war in Gaza and bringing the hostages back. One last note, the president has a big meeting tonight. He's going to have an event hosting over 100 world leaders here in New York before he heads back to Washington. Blake?
Yep, so your days and your evening is not done, not yet, at least. Our Laura Ingle live tonight at the UN.
That's
Laura,
right.
Thank you. President Trump today. This, I thought, was probably the headline, the story of the day for the president on the world stage. A major shift in his stance on Russia. For example, saying Russian jets should be shot down if they enter into NATO territory. And then he seemingly broke with the Russian President Vladimir Putin while speaking with Emmanuel Macron. Watch.
The biggest disappointment, but I think that'll happen eventually, is the Ukraine and Russia situation. But we've settled. I thought that was going to be the easiest one because of my relationship with Putin, but unfortunately that relationship didn't mean anything, unfortunately.
Did you hear that? He said the relationship with Putin didn't mean anything, unfortunately. And just as he said that, or slightly before, the president posting this to social media, saying that Ukraine should be in a position to win back all of its territory. He also called Russia a, quote, paper tiger. A much different stance from just a few weeks ago when the president and Vladimir Putin, we all know that, in Alaska, appearing on the red carpet together with the goal of negotiating peace, or at the minimum, a ceasefire. What just happened? With me now, retired Rear Admiral Mark Montgomery, once again with me here on the Hill. He's a senior fellow at the Foundation for Defense Democracies. And Niall Gardner with us as well, director of the Margaret Thatcher Center for Freedom at the Heritage Foundation. Niall, nice to see you, sir.
Great
Admiral,
to see you.
thanks for being with us. That was a 180. What just happened, seemingly in an afternoon?
Well, I mean, Blake, I was pretty surprised. I mean, I've been, for the last 3 months, the president's been saying, in the next 2 weeks, I'm going to hold Vladimir Putin accountable. And there's always been some intervention, sometimes by Putin, sometimes by the president, that kicked the can on this. I think the president finally got tired of Putin's obstruction, of his attacks on civilian infrastructure in Ukraine, and of his pressing forward when the war, when President Trump felt he was offering President Putin a good out with concessions from President Zelensky in Ukraine and the opportunity to end really a failed campaign in Ukraine.
So we have both of you up here tonight as you both testified about NATO before Congress in the recent weeks. There was that comment about what happens if NATO jets or Russian jets go into NATO. Is it okay if you see them shot down? And the president said yes. Do you think Vladimir Putin now tests Donald Trump and NATO on that front?
I don't think so, because the president, was clear here, and we were being tested for the last week by Russia. Drones the 19 drones into Poland, potentially the drones into Romania. Hard to say on those, but 100% this 12-minute penetration into Estonia. Now the planes very carefully went along, north-south, went along the border and didn't make an aggressive run at Tallinn, the capital. But still, this was all, demonstrations by Putin, and now Trump has met the challenge. He said, we will do something. Now, look, there's a big difference between we will do something and we do something.
Right, of course.
But I think this was appropriate. I was the UCOM J5 years ago, the head of plans and policy, and this was our plan. If Russia does these kind of penetrations, you'd warn them, and then if they continued in an offensive, hostile way, you'd shoot them down.
What do you expect next here?
Well, I think, firstly, this is peace through strength being projected by the United States, which is the right message to send to Vladimir Putin. Donald Trump tried to negotiate in good faith with Putin. Putin, of course, has not negotiated in good faith at all. In fact, he's completely untrustworthy. And I think it's been sent a very clear message by the United States, the world's superpower, that the Russians will be held to account for whatever they do. And if they decide to send fighter jets into NATO airspace, they will be shot down. So that's that's the right message to send, actually, because we cannot allow the Russians to get away with any kind of threats and intimidation. Actually, if they're foolish enough to take on the NATO alliance, they will face the consequences.
Trump calls Jay Powell too late. Was he too late here when it comes to Putin?
In my view, Donald Trump has made every effort actually to bring about peace in Ukraine, and the Russians have refused to really to act in good faith in any fashion at all. And I think that Donald Trump has concluded, of course, that Vladimir Putin is completely and thoroughly untrustworthy. And so the message being sent right now, very clearly to Moscow, is that they will be held to account. And the United States, of course, is looking to our European allies to fully support and stand with the people of Ukraine who've been fighting very bravely to end their purchases of Russian oil and to stand with the United States, actually, in terms of the economic pressure being applied against Russia, and also, of course, support for Ukraine as well.
He called Vladimir Putin essentially a paper tiger. So I wonder, Admiral, as all of this just sort of unfolds and Putin's watching all this in Russia, what comes next?
Well, look, Russia has been practicing cognitive warfare, influence operations against us for years. And I think this was a good pushback by Trump. He knows this hurts. Calling Putin a paper tiger is absolutely the most kind of vicious thing he could do. I think it was perfect. He sent that message that, look, I'm tired of you. I think now is right that, we gave him more than enough time to do this. And the real key here is Europe now. They've got to buy the U.S. weapon systems and that's really what weapon systems are available, buy the U.S. weapon systems that Ukraine needs to both defend itself and impose cost on Moscow. And I think we have the defense industrial base to do it. They have the money. President Trump has insisted they have that money, and Ukraine will be the beneficiary.
Show me the scene, if we can, over at the UN today, because this is how it started. It was the president and the first lady walking up the escalator there, something they've probably done, I don't know, tens of thousands of times in their life, and then, whoa, it stopped. That's the president and the first lady. Here was the White House. They said if someone at the Caroline Leavitt at the UN intentionally stopped the escalator as the president and first lady were stepping on, they need to be fired. You think do you think they were purposely trying to send the president there a message?
I mean, you can't rule out that possibility, but at the same time, of course, the UN is hugely inefficient, mismanaged, corrupt. I think, a broken escalator is a symbol of a broken down United Nations, frankly. It receives far too much money from the United States, a lot of it which is wasted. And I do think the UN should be fully held to account. Whatever happened in that incident, actually, the UN should not be allowed to get away with this. It's absolutely disgraceful.
Niall, Admiral, they were testifying up on the Hill recently with us tonight here on the Hill. Appreciate you both. Thanks for coming on.
Great pleasure. Thank you.
Of course. All right, still to come tonight. Here on the Hill, convicted of trying to kill President Trump, happened today. And then a bizarre scene inside a courtroom. Why U.S. Marshals then had to jump in to try to stop Ryan Ralph. Plus, the return of Jimmy Kimmel. What will he say tonight about his suspension, if anything? The FCC Commissioner Brendan Carr already weighing in. And hot off the press, Kamala Harris not holding back as she kicks off her book tour. We'll tell you what she is saying now. I thank you for being with us tonight. We're not done, not going anywhere. A lot of show left. I'm Blake Burman, back on the other side in 4 minutes.
Liquid gel.
All right, welcome back, and it's back to the road. Charlie Kirk's Turning Point USA relaunching its college campus tour this week. Conservative commentator Michael Knowles guest hosting an event last evening at the University of Minnesota Twin Cities. There's more events scheduled in the upcoming weeks as well. It was the organization's first campus event since Kirk's assassination. And then there's the late-night TV host Jimmy Kimmel, back on television later this evening. He's hosting his show for the first time since being suspended by ABC over comments that he made after Kirk's killing. ABC saying it made the decision after thoughtful conversations with Kimmel. But he won't be seen on television stations owned by Sinclair or Nexstar. Nexstar, as you might know, owns NewsNation. ABC affiliates owned by both companies had planned to preempt Kimmel's show before ABC pulled it and still plan to do so tonight. The Federal Communications Commission Chairman Brendan Carr reacting to the story's latest developments today, posting the following, saying in part, quote, "We need to keep empowering local TV stations to serve their communities of license." With me now, Aaron McGuire, strategist at Axiom Strategies, and Dan Cannonen, former Battleground States Director for the Biden-Harris campaigns. Hello to you both. Thanks for being here.
Yeah, thank you.
Two obviously different stories, but let's start with Kimmel. What do you expect him to say tonight, and what do you want him to say tonight?
What I expect is something at the top that's probably a bit of legalese to clean up a little bit of what he did say, because this wasn't a joke that Jimmy Kimmel made. He said that the person who assassinated Charlie Kirk was a MAGA person. That is a false statement. That needs to be cleaned up by the network because they're leaving themselves open to liability. Two, what I would love for Jimmy Kimmel to say is, I'm sorry. I messed up. This was not the right thing to say. And because of that, I'm going to change my tone. However, if we have learned anything through Jimmy Kimmel's illustrious career, including his blackface days on The Man Show, he is not one to change his tunes, change his stripes, or apologize.
Do you think you get the I'm sorry. What do you think you'll hear from him? What do you want him to say from your vantage
I think
point?
the first comment, was done a little flippantly. And I don't think he was saying exactly that, Aaron. He wasn't saying he was a MAGA person. He was making the point that there were those on the right trying to paint him as something else or whatever they were painting him as to score political points. It was not artfully delivered. And so I do think cleanup is probably required on that point. Whatever he meant to say or wants to articulate now.
He said it was a MAGA person.
No, that's not what he said.
It is.
But what he should do at the top is, I think, clean up how he wants to clean that up. And I think less for legal purposes, and I think to have a moment here to talk about where we are in this country. I think rather than be flippant and sort of do it as a joke as he did before, a half joke, is to take a moment to actually talk to the American people about what this moment is like for free speech, what it's like to be respectful of people. And I would, if I were him, I would choose to lead with Kirk as the man, as the husband, as the father, and make that really, really clear. And then if you want to have a nuanced point about political beliefs and rhetoric, you can, but start with that.
All right, other side, Turning Point USA, Erica Kirk says, the campus tours will continue. They are continuing. We saw one last night, Aaron. There are more in the coming days and weeks. What do you think we see from Turning Point USA going forward now that what Charlie Kirk was doing continues?
Yeah, I think you're going to see a growing Turning Point USA. You've seen a lot of applications for new chapters. I think you'll see increased tours and increased activism. And the thing about Turning Point is what a juggernaut they will become in the youth conservative movement, because they already were. They're training activists. They're engaging them. They're deploying them to help make a difference in these swing states. If we're talking about a Minnesota college campus right now where you have active conservatives and they're continuing to grow and feel that their voice is heard, this could change not only the trajectory of elections, of the future of the Republican and conservative movement, but maybe even of what they're hearing on college campuses, because they have become such liberal bastions.
You think elections in 2026?
They could, absolutely. It doesn't take much to recruit and train a volunteer. We are talking right now. They could be making actions right now to affect 2025. You have gubernatorial races in New Jersey and Virginia, other places across the country. You can get these people trained and on the doors today to make a difference.
All right, so you ran the battleground states for Biden and Harris.
You must know what I'm saying.
You hear what Aaron says there from the other side of the aisle, which I wonder how you sort of process this and watch what's happening and say, all right, now we have to do whatever that next thing is.
Charlie Kirk identified something that was not happening in conservative movements, which is to go onto campuses and found a market for his brand of advocacy and found an audience for it, and then did the really hard work. And I actually disagree. I think it's really hard to train volunteers. But he did a great job of it. Right. He should get credit for that. And the organization was prolific in that regard. I think they're clearly going to try to ride that as the next wave, and we'll see if his wife can carry that mantle. I'm not sure Tucker Carlson, by the way, going to college campus is going to do the same kind of thing. But from Democrats' perspective, I would say a couple things. One, we lost young voters, not lost as a demographic, but lost more of them than we should have.
They shrunk. The gap shrunk.
Part of that's Kirk, part of that's the economy. A lot of it was on costs, actually, that's bearing through in the polls.
And it was on Trump as well.
And it was on Trump as well. But they're moving the other way again because he's not delivering on those costs. So the point is not to say that they're going to win him back with Turning Point, or the Democrats are definitely going to win them back in the midterms. The point is to say they're up for grabs. This is a fluid electorate, and we should not assume on one side of the aisle or the other they're going to go one way or the other.
All right. Dan, Aaron, see you back later in the show. Appreciate it. By the way, I should let you know, as Kimmel returns tonight, we are also hearing here on News Nation from Roseanne Barr. Remember her? ABC canceled her show in 2018 after she posted a tweet targeting an aide to former President Obama. Only on News Nation, she talked with our Brian Enton on what she expects to hear.
Well, I think he'll cheer himself on, and his fans, all, 2,000 of them, they'll feel heartened and, like they won another battle against Trump and the people of the United States. So it'll be a big celebration. Oh, he's back, and he'll double down.
All right, that's her point of view. You can watch the full interview tonight on Elizabeth Vargas Reports. Brian Enton speaking to Roseanne Barr. 37 minutes from now. But before then, and still to come tonight here on The Hill, live pictures from the United Nations. This was the story of the day before anyone started talking. Not who said what, but did you hear what the Secret Service found and why they say it could have caused a whole lot of trouble? And speaking of trouble, Is there some for Democrats because of what she's saying now? Kamala Harris unplugged. Her new book is out. She is talking to left-leaning outlets. What she's saying and who she is pointing the finger at when The Hill returns.
.69.
6:30 here in Washington, across the East Coast, including in Florida, where tonight he's found guilty of trying to assassinate President Trump. And moments later in a courtroom, surrounded there by U.S. Marshals, witnesses tell NewsNation he then took a pen and tried to stab himself. Ryan Routh guilty on all charges for the assassination attempt on President Trump at one of his Florida golf courses. The president reacting with relief, as you might imagine, writing, quote, "Very big moment for justice in America." Our Brooke Schaefer live tonight outside that federal courtroom where that verdict was reached. And then, Brooke, that's when the chaos then started, right?
Absolutely, Blake. A dramatic afternoon in federal court here in Florida today after Ryan Routh was found guilty of attempting to assassinate then-candidate President Trump last September. Ryan Routh, after hearing the verdict today, grabbed a pen on the table and tried to stab himself in the neck. U.S. Marshals had to jump in. They jumped on top of Ryan Routh and tried to get his hands away from his neck. It doesn't appear that he was seriously hurt, but we talked to a witness outside of court who described it as chaos.
The court marshals tackled him. He was brought away. The daughter was crying for her, or for him, and she was eventually escorted out. And yeah, that's essentially what happened.
Did something about a pen? Yeah.
Yes, he attempted to stab himself in the neck.
Ryan Routh's daughter was in the courtroom. She chased after his car as he left the courthouse, headed back to jail. As all of this was playing out, she apparently screamed out for her dad to stop and that she was going to get him out. Ryan Routh faces life in prison. His sentencing is set for December. Blake?
Wow. Brooke Schaefer, Fort Pierce, Florida, for us tonight. Brooke, thank you. Also tonight, a major takedown from the United States Secret Service. This one happening behind closed doors, involving a whole lot of tech. You see some of it here. The Secret Service announcing it found 100,000 SIM cards and 300 SIM servers. These are the cards, I believe, within 35 miles of the United Nations in Manhattan. Not a lot of this stuff looks like professional or much, right? But it adds up to a whole lot and a lot of questions. Who's behind it? Unknown. But it is believed to be malicious. The devices recovered were designed to spam millions of messages. It had the ability, for example, to overwhelm New York City's cell network, jam 911 calls, even potentially, get this, even potentially text every single person in the United States within minutes.
This network had the potential to disable cell phone towers and essentially shut down the cellular network in New York City. These devices were concentrated within 35 miles of the global meeting of the United Nations General Assembly. To be clear, these recovered devices no longer pose a threat to the New York tri-state area. We will continue working towards identifying those responsible and their intent.
So that came from the Secret Service, a YouTube video, the press release earlier today. Charles Marino, friend of the show, former Secret Service special agent with us. Charles, I read this morning, and I sent it to our team. I said, wow, because I had so many questions here. This is a big deal, right?
It's a huge deal. Let's remember this started out as an investigation by the Secret Service into swatting incidents involving senior government officials, specifically against the Trump administration shortly after he won the election for his second term. And that led to all of this, which I predict will become one of the largest national security investigations in the country post 9/11.
This right now? This right now.
Huh. Look, this was not a hobby kit put together by some amateurs. We're talking about well over, my sources are telling me, $3 million in equipment strategically located around the New York City metropolitan area which, yes, if used in total, could have disbanded and taken down cell towers. But more importantly, we have no idea how long these have been up and who's been communicating on these networks. We are told now, with the involvement of the Secret Service, FBI, Director of National Intelligence, NYPD, and some other agencies, that there are some known individuals that have been found to be using this network. And it consists of foreigners, foreign organizations, state actors, spies, and potential terrorists.
China? Iran? Russia? Who's behind it?
Well, we're going to have to find out very quickly. And the other big question, Blake, is how many of these types of networks are still up and running in other locations throughout the country? So
you talk about these networks. I want to show the images here because, quite frankly, Charles, I don't know if you have a screen in front of me, but I know you've seen the pictures. But just for our audience here on News Nation, I'm not a tech guy. I know my passwords and not much beyond that. This looks like a garage sale, I think, to the average person, right? Like, or maybe the IT room of a business or something like that. But you call this one of the, if I heard you right, you think this is going to be one of the biggest investigations post 9/11. Tell me what we're looking at. Like what is this and what the significance of all this stuff is?
Well, what you're looking at is a makeshift encrypted off-the-grid network that is set up to remain out of the visual capabilities of law enforcement. In other words, traditional methods for tracking become almost inept if they remain very good at what they're doing. The reason why it looks like a garage sale is because 100,000 SIM cards are constantly being swapped out to change the data to, send law enforcement into a dead end every time they start to investigate. The 300 SIM servers, these are exactly as you would think. These are the ones conducting the communication on this. This was not just text messaging, which you alluded to. Everyone in the country could have been texted off of this in under 12 minutes, but it also facilitated voice calls while masking the identities of those that were using it. So while this may look sloppy, it's what I would call organized chaos by the users to keep law enforcement and national security agencies off their trail.
Charles, real quick, because this, obviously I mentioned a 35-mile radius around New York, so you're talking about millions and millions and millions of people. If a New Yorker or someone in New Jersey or around the areas, Connecticut, watching tonight, do they have any exposure to this?
Well, they don't right now because the Secret Service has disbanded this network. Right. But I'll tell you, the Secret Service approached this from a protective intelligence standpoint. Other agencies like Homeland Security Investigations, the FBI, DNI, they'll handle the criminal investigation on this. The main role here, especially with the backdrop of the United Nations General Assembly and 150 heads of state in New York City, their role, the Secret Service, was to take this down quickly so that it could not be used to disrupt communications for everyone in the New York City area, including Secret Service agents, Diplomatic Security Service, NYPD, and any other first responders. So the bigger question is, was this part of some type of terrorist organization? Because we know they don't like to use one of one with attacks, but one of many. So I'm telling you, Blake, I'll call it right here. It's going to become a huge national security investigation.
Like I said, when I read it this morning, just wow, so many questions. Charles Marino with us tonight. Charles, I'm sure we'll talk to you about it again soon. Thank you.
Thanks, Blake.
Of course. All right, still to come tonight. Other side of the break here from the Hill. The president's scathing message to world leaders today while in New York at the UN.
I'm really good at this stuff. Your countries are going to hell.
That was just part of it, I'm telling you. What he also had to say to European allies. And on the other side of the aisle, it's Kamala Harris sending the right message to the Democratic Party. Her book is out. She is talking panel, other side.
Tonight, as tensions with Russia hit a high.
I'm Robert Sherman in the Baltic Sea, tagging along with NATO forces as Russia's so-called shadow fleet attempts to evade U.S. sanctions.
We take you to the front lines tonight at 7/6 Central, only on News Nation.
The media blitz is underway. Kamala Harris now reemerging, plugging her new book, 107 Days. But in doing so, has she inadvertently revealed what is potentially wrong with the Democratic Party? And also, on the other side, the direction in which maybe it should head. Let's start with her defense of not picking who she now says was her first choice to be her running mate, Pete Buttigieg, last year.
To say that he couldn't be on the ticket effectively because he was gay is hard to hear.
No, that's not what I said. That he couldn't be on the ticket because he is gay. As a vice presidential running mate, a gay man, with the stakes being so high, it made me very sad, but I also realized it would be a real risk.
Now I want you to listen to Harris earlier today when she talked about not what went wrong in her campaign, but what she believes is currently going wrong in the president's second term.
First of all, he said his number one priority and the number one thing he would do is bring down costs.
Yeah.
That's what he said. And I believe there are a lot of people who voted for him believing that that's what he would do. Fast forward to today.
Yeah. Hello.
Prices are higher. The cost of food is higher. Inflation is higher. Unemployment is higher. He lied.
Harris also speaking about the question of her former boss's health in 2024. Does potentially burning bridges hurt her chances in 28 if she goes that direction? Or perhaps more importantly, does it hurt the party as a whole? Full panel here with me now. Jessica Anderson, former budget official in the first Trump administration. Scott Bolden, News Nation political contributor. Aaron McGuire is a Republican strategist, Axiom Strategies. And Dan Cannon, former Battleground State Director for the Biden and Harris campaigns. So hello to you all. I will start with Mr. Cannon, if you all don't mind.
Good evening.
So she was asked about why she didn't pick Pete Buttigieg because she says it would have been a black woman and a gay man. But in doing so, Dan, she said the stakes were too high. And I'm watching that and I'm going, so she's saying she didn't pick a gay man because Trump was in the race? And to me, that sort of reveals maybe one of the issues still with Democrats is no matter what the issue is, everything always connects back to Trump.
Yeah.
Am I onto something there or no?
A little bit. I think the Democrats, candidates, campaigns have to own their decisions and where the direction of the country and the campaign went. And I think that the Biden administration and campaign, which I was a part of, didn't fully grapple with the feeling in the American public about costs. And when we thought we were doing pretty well in the economy, we told folks that it was going well when they thought it wasn't, and that hurt us. And she had the choice before her, when she became the nominee, to break from Biden on cost or any other issue that could have created some distance and filled that gap. And I think that would have been, in hindsight, wise. And I think that's a decision she mentions in her book that she regrets that. I think that's apt, and it's true for her BP picks as well. She has to own these decisions. But I think in terms of the way forward and not making it just about Trump, it is true that Biden was punished for costs. She was punished because the public did not believe that she was going to fix the costs because she was linking herself to Biden, essentially. And Trump took advantage of that. But now he's not delivering on costs. And the American people have lost faith in him on the economy. He's down to 34% approval there, largely on costs. That's the way forward.
I'm going to get there in a second. But Scott, what about the question that I posed to Dan?
Yeah.
Which is, even on something like that, she brought it back to Trump and your side of the aisle. I think at some point, if you're going to look forward, you kind of have to move past that, do you not?
Well, Trump isn't a message, and that's not for a messenger, if you will. I think we spend a lot of time as Democrats making him the message, and that's not a winning message. In regard to Buttigieg, I've told you this before on the show, that America's not ready for a woman president, and America's not ready for a gay vice president. We want America to be better than she is, but she is who she is. And there are large swaths of voters who are not going to vote for a woman, and there are large swaths of voters who aren't going to vote for a gay man. And if that's the case, then it's about winning, getting one more vote than the next guy. And that ticket of a black woman and a gay man would have been too risky.
Do you believe it was that, though? Because it seems like
won.
the person most surprised in this country is Pete Buttigieg.
Well, he may say that because he's supposed to say that, and he's running in 2028, if you will.
You don't think he's being genuine there?
No, I think he's being genuine, but the fact of the matter is he wasn't making the decision. And if they didn't believe in the end it was a winning ticket, and by the way, let's be honest, the Republicans would have had a field day with that, given all of their social issues and how they were dividing the Democrats on trans issues, gay issues, racial issues. I mean, that's part of their base and the anger with MAGA. And so I think her decision not to pick him had nothing to do with race or gender. It had to do with whether it was winnable or not.
I'll let Jessica respond, and then I'm coming to you on prices.
Yeah, I think first and foremost, and we've talked about this before, there's a little bit of revisionist history going on here. If she was a strong candidate, she would have picked the running mate that she wanted, period. And she would have plowed forward and said, this is what leadership looks like in America today. So let's put aside the identity politics and I think recognize what's happening with this book tour is she is blowing up the Democratic establishment on her way out the door, which makes me question why. Is it because she wants to come back and rebuild it? Or is she trying to absolve herself from every single type of blame for such a failed run?
Do you think, though, that last soundbite that I played, though, which is on prices and jobs, I don't think you'll find anyone who will say prices haven't gone up in 2021, 22, 23, 24, and 25. And in a way, to the other side, did she lay out the argument that your side of the aisle now is going to have to grapple with?
She was asked point blank on the campaign trail, do you agree with President Biden on the cost of
That was
good?
then. I'm talking about going forward.
She refused to acknowledge that. So we can't even go forward because the baseline is broken. The cost of eggs is down. The cost of gas is down. Are there larger...
Americans think everyone feels it.
All their larger macro problems? Absolutely. We have talked about this on the show for over 200 days now, since the beginning of the Trump administration. All three parts of his economic agenda have to come together. Dereg, tariffs, and spending. Only two of the three have, and I think the American people have to decide how long of a chance to give him, and is it settled in the November ballot box or not?
Aaron, here's what the White House had to say. They say lying and misleading is no way for Kamala Harris to try and dig herself out of irrelevance. The days of Kamala Harris and Joe Biden's debilitating inflation crisis are over. What about what she hit on there, though, with prices?
That's going to be a Democrat talking point, but the good news is for Republicans, at least they've got Kamala Harris's sound bites for this because she keeps making herself politically relevant. She keeps putting herself at the front of the Biden-Harris administration and failure for Democrats. This book tour could not be more ill-advised at this point, unless she actually thinks she's going to burn down the Democrat Party and try to rebuild it. But I don't think this arsonist knows how to rebuild it. I think that Kamala Harris thinks that if she burns down the Democrat Party, they will anoint her again to be somebody because she can spew the loudest noise about costs. Here's the thing that Republicans need to be careful of, that to your point, Dan, you said earlier, that your campaign didn't acknowledge the way the American people felt about costs and about prices. To Jessica's point, eggs are cheaper, gas is cheaper, but if the American people don't feel it, then Republicans will feel it at the ballot box.
But you hear the Republicans now, you heard both Republicans. They sound like the Democrats a year ago, quite frankly.
At least I acknowledged it.
I'm acknowledging it now. I would offer a friendly amendment, Dan. I think the messaging for the Democratic Party during the campaign about individual rights and democracy, that if the economy is not good and people aren't feeling that the economy is good, then the messaging was dead wrong. Had we focused on the economy and focused on those kitchen table issues, and social issues are kitchen table issues.
I want to give Dan the last word real quick.
Yeah, I was just going to jump in here to say, the reality is that the American people wanted a fighter. They didn't see it with Kamala. She wasn't acknowledging the reality. Trump has said from the beginning he has to have all of these pieces of the economic agenda to work. He's trying to deliver that. Will it be fast enough? And that's the question.
You'd agree this is his economy right
now. But the things that matter are down.
I want to end with Dan real quick.
Not all of them.
Just because you ran the battleground states for her. Yeah. Your last thought as you see all of this play out.
Well, Aaron did acknowledge that stuff. I appreciate that, Aaron. Look, I think that what she hits on here and what Democrats should understand is in the last election, people thought Republicans stood for working people and Democrats stood for the wealthy and the elite. And in fact, we won 100K households plus and nobody else. for Democrats to get back on it, we have to not only make the issue about cost, but then deliver on cost to the American people.
All right, we'll leave it there. Thank y'all. Appreciate it. Still to come here on the Hill, other side of the break. Oh, it's the Ryder Cup coming up, don't you know? And I'm going to show you what the captain had to say today when we return.
69369 today.
All right, if you're just getting home, trying to catch up on today's top stories, here's what's trending right now on thehill.com. You're going to hear lots of talk about a shutdown. They need to fund the government by the end of the month, and it's starting to heat up on both sides of the aisle. How about this? DHS says ICE won't comply with California ban on agents wearing masks. And then we were just talking about this before the break. Charlemagne the God says Biden's legacy over after Harris's booked some of what's trending. All right, time for my take now. It is the Ryder Cup this weekend. You might know USA, Europe in golf, and it's going to take place in New York. President Trump will be in attendance. And today, the world #1, Scotty Scheffler, revealed that Trump reaches out to him sometimes after wins. But it was something else that caught my attention as well. Here's the U.S. captain, Keegan Bradley, on if the president's appearance will be a distraction.
I'm deeply honored that the President of the United States is going to come support our team at the Ryder Cup. I think anytime you can be around a current president is a pretty phenomenal thing.
And that is a phenomenal quote. I tell people all the time this. If you are fortunate enough somehow to have an opportunity to be in the presence of a president, you should relish that, no matter what your political views are. Keegan Bradley there is apolitical and spot on as it gets, and I would note, while wearing the red, white, and blue. I thank you for watching tonight. I'm Blake Burman. Brian Enton takes it from here.